Hello and welcome to PHTV's March Madness special. We're in round 2 here. We're moving forward into the tournament. We're going to be talking about the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. But first, let's talk about how bad our brackets were busted this last week. What were some surprises you saw upset-wise through each region?
Well, Dillon, I just think that everybody's bracket is busted. I don't think there's any left on ESPN that has a perfect bracket. I heard a statistic come to work this morning that the odds of getting a perfect bracket is like 9.2 quadrillion in one, which is an amazing, and so I think everybody's bracket's busted up pretty good. But we are doing well. You've got all your Final Four left.
Yeah,
I lost Georgetown, and we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit about that upset, which I don't mind too much. But yeah, I lost one of my Final Four, and Dakota Jones will be joining us later. He has his Final Four, so as long as you got your Final Four, you're in good shape. But it was the first round, which is always you're waiting to see the upsets. It was really a bracket of upsets, Dillon. So
especially in the wild west, as they like to call it.
Yeah, wow.
Talk about all the upsets that happened there. You had Wichita State over Gonzaga there in the second round, which was big. It opened up the West right there. Ole Miss over Wisconsin in the opening round, I got that pick right. I'm not gonna brag, but I did get that pick right. Maybe.
And I got Wichita State. I picked Wichita State.
Did,
no, I didn't. I picked them over Pitt. I didn't get them over Gonzaga, but I did pick them to win the first round though.
And then LaSalle went on and beat Kansas State, and then they beat Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So now LaSalle's going to be playing against, who is it?
LaSalle's going to be playing against, we've got Wichita State, so those two will be.
That's an upset bracket.
That's an upset bracket. That's a little bit of a Cinderella story that's going on in the bracket. I don't think it's the biggest Cinderella story, but it's one of them that really's got people's attention. And LaSalle was a playing game.
Yeah.
Right, so that's an amazing thing. Come in for a playing game, and then now you're playing in Sweet 16. Wow, that's a big accomplishment.
It's crazy to think somebody be the last four in to be on the road to the Final Four this far into the tournament.
Yeah, they have played really well. It's not about, and for our viewers, I think that most people will agree that it's not about who the best team is at this point in time. I think it's about who's playing the best basketball to win this tournament, and that's what it actually is. It's a basketball tournament, and you don't have to be the best team to win it. Of course, sometimes that's the way it goes, but anybody can win it. And I think that this is the prime example this year, 2013, 75th anniversary of this tournament. We're going to see people have opportunities with lower seeds actually winning this tournament. I think that's the exciting thing about March Madness.
Let's go ahead and talk about that big upset in the South. We've got Florida Gulf Coast beating Georgetown by 78 to 68, and that game wasn't as close as it really looked.
Yeah.
Otto Porter Jr. was able to get them back into the game a little while, but Florida Gulf Coast, they're athletic.
They are
Came out of nowhere.
It really just came out of nowhere, but they're almost speechless. They're the first 15 seed to ever make the Sweet 16. It's an amazing feat for them. And if you watch them, those guys they're dangerous because no pressure was on them at the start of this. No pressure. They went out and played basketball like they were playing out in the backyard. They're throwing alley-oops. The Comer guys jumping up and down. They had some amazing dunks. If you looked at the fans in that arena, they took the tide of those games, and instead of pulling for Georgetown, everybody was wanting to see the dunks and see them do all those amazing things that they were doing, and they were just having fun. And I think that's the big thing. Now, here's the question: they had fun. Now the Sweet 16's here. They've got the week build up. They've got the media on. Pressure's building. Are they going to be able to come out and perform like they did in the early rounds without any of that pressure bothering them, or is the pressure going to get to them? I think that's one of the keys that we'll have to watch with Florida Gulf Coast, if they can move on and advance to the grade 8.
And I'll tell you another thing this Florida Gulf Coast team is good at. They've got big guys, but their big guys can get up and down the floor pretty quick.
Yeah.
Most of these big teams from the Big Ten, such as Indiana, and Zeller can't get down the floor as quick as these guys from Florida Gulf Coast can.
Yeah, and he runs like a deer, but it'd be a tough matchup to run up and down with those guys that they put on the floor. And I think they'll draw him away from the goal too, but I don't think they can guard Zeller in the post. So, but I think Florida Gulf Coast, Dunk City's what's the nickname to them. And I think that's what's exciting everybody, and I think that's going to be one of the most anticipated games of the Sweet 16. I know I'm going to watch it.
The Sweet 16 has a great slate of games, which we'll
Yeah.
talk about here later, but that'll be a fun game. Florida versus Florida Gulf Coast, and the state of Florida has 3 teams in the Sweet 16 with Miami joining them there.
Yeah, and I looked up, and that's the first time ever in the tournament that 3 Florida schools have had everybody in the Sweet 16. So again, history making here is and
Yeah.
you know, with college basketball, as you watch it unfold over the years, you can really tell that the small schools with that 3-point line are being competitive, even with our larger schools that are getting the better recruits, the 5-star recruits. And the talent level, you know, I think that, you know, Indiana, if they play Florida Gulf Coast, they're going to beat them, you know, 70% of the time. But there's that other little chance that this group has with that 3-point line and just going out in this tournament atmosphere that's able to upset these teams. So, and I know that Florida Gulf Coast, they took one of my Final Four out like that. And I looked up, and I wasn't even watching. I didn't even think that was even an issue, and was just watching. I can't remember the game I was watching, and then up in the corner I see that Georgetown's down by 20, and I'm thinking, what is going on? Turnover, and I'm sitting here watching these guys run up down the floor dunking, and the dunk at the end of that game where they just tossed up, this guy comes in from nowhere is just amazing, and you know, that's the great thing about this tournament.
Either people are really excited about this Florida Gulf team, unless they got money on the brackets. They probably hate Florida Gulf Coast.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But I like the upset team. It didn't really ruin my bracket, but if it did, since Ole Miss got beat, I'm gonna start pulling for Florida Gulf Coast. I like. They're cool to watch. They're fun to watch.
And what about that Ole Miss game? Dale, have you got anything that you'd like to tell the viewers about the Ole Miss game?
Marshall Henderson got fouled on the last play. You can see it plain as day. A guy comes across the back whenever he's trying to put up a shot, and that takes the possession away from Ole Miss. LaSalle gets it back, takes it back down court, and scores on the last second shot. I think Marshall Henderson, if he gets fouled, he makes both his free throws. Ole Miss goes up by 2. Of course, after that, they could run it back down the floor and shoot a 3 and win the game. But it changes the whole game. And also, we had another call I'd like to ask you about, the Iowa State-Ohio State game, when the guy looked like he was taking a charge. It could have been a 4-point swing there. He made the basket, but they called a charge on him. What do you think about that play?
And just refereeing in general, people don't realize this, but the referees go through a process as well. The best referees are in the NCAA tournament. And I watched several games during that time, and I was a little disappointed with the refereeing, to be honest with you. I think that's one call that it was clearly, if you looked on the instant replay, that he was inside the circle, that it should have been a block, which would, you know,
and he made the layup.
And he made the layup, and that would have probably changed the outcome to that game. But that's such a split second, you know, and I mean, referee at that stage should be looking to see if he's outside the circle. Maybe he just couldn't see what the angle is in.
And it was non-reviewable.
It's non-reviewable, and I think that's something that the college basketball world needs to think about the review. I don't think we need to slow the tempo down, but I think that we need to be able to review some of those things and have an additional official to maybe make a call on that. But anyway, you know, officials do make mistakes, but I think overall the refereeing in the first 2 rounds that we watched was a little inconsistent. I think that they if you'd watch one game, it would be super physical. You'd go to the next one, and it would be ticky-tack, and there was no consistency with it. I know that I don't think we've changed any of the outcomes of the game, but you know, my guy, I picked Bucknell to you know, make a little run and this and that. You know, some of those major players that took a lot of shots, they were getting bumped, and those are calls that they used to get in their conference, and they weren't getting them in the tournament. I think that messed a little bit with a lot of their mindsets about being able to make shots. So you know, and referee it can really dictate how you play, and it can favor one style over another. And I think that's really when you see some of the upstats. Look at the refereeing. Look at how the game was called. Who did it benefit? I'll even give you a good example with the North Carolina Kansas game. Of course, my Heels, you know, they went out, but it was a super physical game, and we didn't get a lot of help from the referees. And I'm not whining about that. Of course, every Duke fan that's watching this right now is saying, "Oh, there's a Carolina fan whining about it." But Duke will get theirs in the next couple of rounds. We'll just mark that down. But I think the refereeing did make a case. When you're the smaller group, and we were, Kansas way more physical, it makes a big difference if the referees allow the more physical team to push you around. I think that's what ends up happening, and that certainly wasn't the reason why we lost the game, but it did change the flow of that game toward Kansas, and you can look at that in the second half. So,
And like in the Ole Miss and an Iowa State game, it's tough to see teams that practice all year, work all year round, to go down to one last call and end their season, especially for the seniors, you know.
yeah, it makes it a tough thing, and you know, we talk about upsets. You know, the Ohio State was very lucky.
No, yeah.
I mean, it was tie ball game, and I can't remember the score right off. I don't think I have, but you know, it's a tie ball game, and here they are setting it up front. Next thing you know, you got Kraft, who drills a 3-point shot with 0.3 seconds or something like that, and
Takes the air out of
the air out of the building. And you know, those are big games. But that Khalif White, we'll talk about later on. Boy, what a game he had! So amazing game, and amazing tournament he just had. That's a guy that should be playing the NBA if you want to look for an NBA watch. So
yeah, he had Temple right on the verge of beating Indiana there for a little while.
yeah,
And that's a team I really didn't think played well, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But another upset from the East, which was probably the least upsetted bracket. We only had a 12 seed beating a 5 seed Cal over UNLV. An interesting note: 12 seeds were 3-1 over 5 seeds in this tournament. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing stats. You know, that's something. Next time you fill your bracket out, I always pick the 12 or 5.
At least one.
At least one, yeah.
I mean, the 12 seeds did all right this tournament.
Yeah.
You didn't have faith in Ole Miss, which I let you know there while the game was going on.
Yeah, and I should have. I should have listened to you. That would have got me one extra pick.
Or something. Yeah. But with that, we're going to go ahead and go to commercial break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back here to PHTV Sports March Madness Show. Up next, we're going to talk about some viewer emails. We talked about getting some viewer emails. We finally got some, and we're going to hit Coach Caywood with a couple of these. We didn't get any hate mail from the Duke fans. Me for the Tennessee fans.
They must know that it's true, Dillon. That's all I can say. If we don't get any emails or tweets or anything, they must know that everything we're saying is true, which makes me feel good.
Yeah, we're not getting any
So
bad stuff sent to us. First one, do you feel like Michigan is playing the best basketball at this time? Or do you feel like VCU's defense made it easier for Michigan to get up and down the floor?
Well, I really think that VCU was a good basketball team, but they ran up on
a perfect storm.
It really was, and they went through Akron without their point guard. I don't think they even had a worry in that game, as it just got out of control early. But when they went to Michigan, they actually found somebody that could run better than they could, and they've got Burke, who is Player of the Year possibility right there. And they did force him into turnovers. And I think he ended up with maybe close to double digits, maybe double digits in turnovers. But it still wasn't enough. That Michigan is, as we talked about, they have NBA bodies on that team. They got size, they can see over the traps, and they just run away from VCU as the game went. And, you know, really, if you're looking at that question, I think, you know, and we talked about it a little bit, can Michigan win a national championship? Yes, they can. They can win a national championship. They've got the tools to do that. I think one of the problems that they have is that they went through the first 2 rounds with easy teams. And now they're going to start facing some tough teams. And I think that, you know, when they go in and they really start playing high-quality defensive teams that's going to shut them down, that they're going to be in really bad shape. Kansas is a good defensive team. They showed that against the Tar Heels, who've been averaging 70, 80. They locked him down on the perimeter, and they guarded the rim with what's his name, White. Is that correct? That he just blocked. I think he had 6 or 7 blocks against us. So they're a good defensive team.
Jeff Withy.
Withy, yes. I couldn't remember his name right off, and I'll probably
Big 12 defensive player of the year. It blew your mind, though.
Well, I just probably because he blocked so many of my Tar Heel shots, I just didn't want to remember his name.
Yeah.
But he really guarded the basket, and now they're going. When they play Michigan, I think that you're going to see that they're going to falter to that defensive pressure. I think Kansas will beat them, and I just did a little homework. When you look at Michigan, they lost to Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State, which are all good defensive basketball teams, and they kept the Michigan down into about an average of about 60 points during those stretches of losses. And I think that's what you're going to see when they run into Kansas. They're going to lock them down. They're going to make them earn. problem with Kansas, if Kansas really had an outstanding score, they would be a shoe-in for a national
Which
championship.
they do, and McLemore, but he's a freshman.
Yeah.
And he hadn't really done anything in the tournament so far. But if he gets hot, you better watch out with your bracket.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're playing good, everybody else is. McLemore's been a little bit quiet. He missed a lot of open looks against Carolina.
Oh, yeah, he really did. And that was just
That sort of kept them in the game early.
Yeah, poor offensive showing on both teams. But, yeah, he has to get on fire for them to win the national championship, I think. But I think Kansas goes over the top of Michigan.
I think the thing about those teams is North Carolina started off hot from around the perimeter, but you got to play inside out eventually against a team like Kansas.
Yeah.
And I don't think Michigan can do that. They don't got a big post player. They're more of a perimeter shooting team, and I mean, if they're on, they'll shoot from anywhere.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, if it's got to be the perfect night for Michigan, and I think they had the perfect night against VCU. I want to see if they can do that again this week. Kansas is going to be prepared.
Yes.
And Bill Self's going to have them prepared, and I think that's going to be a great matchup there. The 1 and 4 doesn't seem like Michigan should be a 4 seed. They were playing like they should have been a number 1 seed over Gonzaga the way they were playing.
Yeah, exactly.
They've been on fire the last 2 days.
Yeah.
During that. Of course, you can be hot as you know as a coach, you can be hot as a team, and then
cool
week can do a lot to a basketball.
Yeah, this week right here is important if you're going to win a national championship to keep your intensity up and don't let the media get to you. Don't, like if you're Florida Gulf Coast, don't believe the hype, Duck City. Don't believe the hype. Stay humble. Go out, have fun, keep that going. That's how you win and get to the grade A. But that media gets to you. That pressure as it builds up. Just an interesting fact. Probably nobody knew what Florida Gulf Coast was. Charles Barkley did not know who Florida Gulf Coast was asking where they're at and all this stuff. But now people know where they are. And I was reading on the internet that they had like 500 some people applying to that school for the upcoming semester. And then after this 2 victories, they've got like 10,000 applicants to that school. So March Madness, gets little schools. Gets little schools their name out. People know who they are. Charles Barkley now knows who the Florida Gulf Coast is.
What that matters, we don't know.
I don't know what that means. So
I like Charles Barkley on the coverage of the basketball.
I do too.
He brings a different.
Frank Caliendo does a great impression of him too. But I won't get into that.
And they'll be playing Florida, and Florida, they're going to eat up that Florida Gulf Coast team if they try to come in with a lot of glitz and glam. Florida, they're going to be I'm an SEC basketball guy, and they're a physical basketball team.
They're athletic, physical. They're going to come in,
and they sort of fly in under the radar. Nobody's really talking about Florida. Billy Donovan's a great coach.
He is a great coach, and they played well. They've just not really jumped over the hump to get to that great status.
And they've got inside players, but they haven't really relied on them up to this point.
Yeah.
The thing about Florida is they play 2 different games. They're either going to come out and they're going to get Eric Murphy on the outside hitting threes every time, or they're going to try to get an inside out game. I think they're better if they play inside out. But I mean, Florida, if they settle for those outside shots, I think Florida Gulf Coast still has a chance to make this Cinderella story keep going on into the tournament.
Yeah, and I did some stats and stuff, but Florida, they have they've got Murphy averaging 12.6.
He's 7 foot tall,
yes.
So he can knock down anything with a hand in his face.
Boynton 12.3, Rosario 12.3, and Young 10. They've got 4 guys averaging 10 or 4, and there's another guy, and I didn't put his name down, but he's averaging 9 points. So they've really got almost 5 guys that at any point in time can put up, and they're very balanced scoring with that. And I think that means a lot at this point in time.
And that's scary whenever you're coming in, you don't really know who to defend for Florida Gulf Coast.
Right.
And you look at what they've played so far, they've really just had to guard one person, Otto Porter Jr., and the guy from San Diego State, I don't really have his name written down. He was a great player. I've seen him play a lot this year. And I know that they've done a good job shutting down one player for each team, which that's all you got to do. You look at what Ole Miss had, Marshall Henderson, and he wasn't really able to do much in the first game, but they were actually able to win in LaSalle. He did all right against LaSalle.
But he did a pretty good job and lost his head a little at the end there, but that's expected. So
let's move on. We got some more emails that viewers are saying that they really think Syracuse can make a run down there, but they are playing Indiana. But Indiana's not played the best that we've seen them play this year.
Well, what we have is a contrast in styles. Syracuse is going to play a 2-3 zone. They're an efficient basketball team on the defensive end. Offensive, they've struggled at times. And they've got some guys. They've got Fairs averaging 14.4, Sutherland's averaging 13.9, and a couple other guys averaging around 12 or 13 points. So they've got some firepower, but they have had lapses where those, defensive pressures got to them and they've not been able. I think one of this is they won't play that 2-3. That's what he does, okay, and that's all he's going to do. Indiana is going to get that basketball and go, and I think that Indiana, who's not played well, is a sleeping giant here because I think, in my personal opinion, I think that them and Louisville are the two teams that has played the enough to get through, and Louisville's really kind of swept through it with their defensive pressure, but they are, they really look to me as two of the best teams in the nation right now. And, Indiana with Zellers averaging 17, how you say his name,
Oladipo,
yes. Oladipo, what a great game athlete that he is. They've got some guys that can get it done. So I think it's real important for them. So
we're going to go to commercial break, and up next we're going to be talking about the rest of the Sweet 16 matchups.
Yep.
Welcome back to PHTV Sports March Madness Show. We've switched venues here. We've moved back into Coach Caywood's room where we started shooting this last week. We've had a lot of fun doing it up to this point, but we've been talking about the bracket in general over the past week. Now we're going to talk about specific matchups. And let's go ahead and head out to the west right there where a lot of things have been shaken up. You've got Wichita State, who knocked off Gonzaga, and then you've got LaSalle, who knocked off Ole Miss, which was a really big upset game in that point.
yeah, and then you have Harvard, who really messed everybody's bracket up, beating New Mexico, who a lot of people had going on to the later rounds. And Arizona, I think, was somebody that was a surprise to me how well they played here in the last little bit. And then rounding out, I think our favorite in this bracket, at least mine, and you can see that all three of us have it in our bracket here, is Ohio State, which is one of our Final Four that we still have alive. So and I think of all those teams that you see right there, Ohio State, Arizona, LaSalle, Wichita State, I think Ohio State is by far the better of the team. And we talked about easy brackets. I think Ohio State now has the easiest road to the Final Four.
Yes. Talent-wise, you see Ohio State playing Arizona. I think that matchup goes well for Ohio State. Then the next game is going to be an upset. It's going to have to knock them off Wichita State or LaSalle, which either team can do that.
Yeah.
Both those teams are talented. Wichita State plays that big X factor, hitting the three ball. I saw I saw Wichita State against Gonzaga. They were down by 9 with about 7 minutes to go. They hit 3 threes in a row on 3 straight trips, tie the game up, and that just changes the whole game. The three ball does for Wichita State.
Yeah, they'll need to hit that to advance to the Final Four, that's for sure. So, but I think, like I said, if Ohio State comes and plays basketball and locks people down defensively, I think they'll ride into the Final Four. That which was a tough bracket for us, now ends up probably being the easiest bracket of all the rest we have left. Yeah, I think that the West regional champion is at Ohio State's to lose.
And we'll come back to the West here later on whenever we actually pick the games if we didn't have them already. Let's go ahead and go to the Midwest. Least upsets in that one, except for Oregon. Oregon was a really big surprise coming in and really did a good job doing. They held down Marcus Smart there for Oklahoma State, got the upset, go on and beat a number 4 seed in St. Louis. So in 2 straight games, they've beat a 5 seed and a 4 seed. They're going to be facing off against Louisville, who we said has been playing the best basketball up to this point.
Yeah, they're one of the top 2 teams in the nation, in my opinion. And they've kind of cruised through the first 2 rounds there with North Carolina, A&T, I'm sorry, AT&T, we're going to make a phone call. But A&T and then Colorado State. So, but they really cruised through. They really weren't challenged. I think Oregon will challenge them with athleticism, but I think that is the toughest bracket in the Midwest right now. Is the toughest bracket with Louisville, Oregon playing. Then you go down Michigan State and Duke. I think Izzo is finally going to end the Dukies' reign. They're going to be done. I was hoping that Creighton would do away with them, but they were able to squeak by McDermott and be able to survive. So that Michigan State and Duke is really a big game for all of us. We all need Michigan State to beat Duke. We all picked Michigan State to beat Duke for our bracket, and all of us picked Louisville to beat whoever they faced. We didn't get that right at all, did we? We had St. Louis there, and the Billikens Billikens let us down.
They did. I don't know what happened.
I don't know.
I guess we shouldn't have had faith in them.
No, don't have faith in a Smurf. I guess that's the factor we should have looked at.
I don't think there's any St. Louis fans that will watch this.
I don't think
We could trash them.
Yeah, we talk all we want to about them. So.
Not like Tennessee, right?
Not like Tennessee, no. So our cameraman, Freddie Regal, we thank him for coming in and helping us so far. Thank you, Freddie. And we're going to go over here to the east now. Welcome back here to our March Madness show. We're going to start by talking. We're going to go ahead and come back to the east bracket here, east and the south bracket. We had a lot of things going on in the east. Indiana beat JMU and Temple beat NC State up there at the top. Cal upsets UNLV and Syracuse beats Montana. From that, both Syracuse and Indiana move on, so that's going to make a Indiana-Syracuse matchup. Then at the bottom here, Butler escapes that upset game we had picked with Bucknell. Marquette beats Davidson, which Dakota Jones had Davidson winning that game. Very close game.
Yeah.
And then Illinois beat Colorado there at the bottom. Miami beats Pacific to make a matchup there between Marquette and Miami. So, Coach, what do you take away from that East bracket?
Well, I just noticed that you got all four of those picks right, Dillon.
Thank you.
I mean, that was a good job. I got Marquette, Miami, Indiana, and Syracuse, but I think out of this bracket, what you look at is that Indiana is still the top seed in that. I think that they will, matchup-wise, they'll run Syracuse out, just score more points than Syracuse. But the Marquette-Miami game is an interesting matchup with Blue from Marquette versus our guy Larkin, who was ACC, just went on fire in the ACC tournament. And I think Miami, I think they'll end up winning that game. But those are close games.
That's a good bracket.
That's a good bracket now as far as matchups and stuff and contrasting styles. So it'd be interesting to see, refereeing will come into play with that. But I would think that our picks are right, that we're going to see Indiana and Miami move on into that one. So.
Yeah, I think the chances of those top seeds moving on are very high. All right, let's go on over to the south. Kansas goes on to beat UNC. I know you don't want to hear me say that, but they just really overpowered them in the post as the game went on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Tar Heels just didn't make enough threes to win that game, but played well, and hopefully, we'll end up getting some good recruits in. Really need a big post guy for the Tar Heels, so hopefully that'll be something. We'll be back there next year, maybe national championship next year.
He's already calling it next year.
Next year, 2014 national championship.
And down under that game at the bottom, VCU played Michigan. Tough game, not really though for VCU. I mean, VCU really didn't play very good defense. I mean, they played good defense like they do all year. Michigan just has such a good offense that they were able to drive it down the floor. It was a perfect storm, like we said earlier here in this telecast.
Yeah, Michigan just got they got 4 guys that's going to be playing the NBA, and that's just the difference in that game, I think.
Then Minnesota and Florida. Florida went on to beat Minnesota, and that's going to make our surprise game there, Florida and Florida Gulf Coast. Who would have thought Florida Gulf Coast would be this far into the tournament?
Yeah, this is our PH Golf upset pick right here. We got Florida Gulf Coast over Florida. That's the PH Golf upset pick of the week. So put your money right there as the golf team has made that upset. Merrick Mullins, Coach Coffee, Florida guys here. So I know they'll be pulling for the big Gators, and I think they're going to. I don't know if they're going to get it. I don't know if they're going to get it. So I think we're going to have to see Florida Gulf Coast. Dunk City going to be could be in the grade 8. We'll have to see.
And I think that's a good matchup. We've got the flashy Florida Gulf Coast team against the hard-nosed Florida team that's going to be coming in to do work. Like I said earlier, defense. They play defense.
Yeah, they really do. And it'll be tough for Florida Gulf Coast to win that one. I think that you'll see. I think that Kansas will lock them down defensively. I think that Kansas, Florida will see each of them in grade 8, and I think that Kansas is going to have a little bit more firepower. You've got Kansas picked, which now, if I knew Florida Gulf Coast was going to upset my Georgetown pick, that's who I'd go for is Kansas. So.
All right, we're going to go to commercial break. We'll be right back. We're going to break down the rest of the bracket. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back here to PHTV Sports Bracketology Show, and we're going to talk about the South bracket here, how we did in the South. Didn't fare very well down here at the bottom with Florida Gulf Coast making that run. We all missed that game, of course. Mm-hmm. Coach Caywood really got the bottom end of the draw there. He had Georgetown winning the South region. But up here at the top, I've got the Kansas game right, the Florida game right, which we all did. But the Michigan VCU game, me and Coach Caywood had a lot of faith in the Rams, where we didn't work out for us, though, as we said.
But Dakota does get Michigan, so
He's moved on, so he's right out the way. This game is going to happen. We'll see if who's right here. Coach Caywood's out here because he went with North Carolina, of course. But he would have been right had they had a little bit better post play. But here, let's go ahead and talk about what you expect from this game, even though you didn't necessarily pick this game.
no, and I just think that Kansas versus Michigan, two top teams in the country. You know, you could really say this is a top three, as a top four team in the nation right now, and that it's going to be a good matchup. But you give Kansas for the defensive end. Michigan has struggled against good defensive teams, we've said before, so I think Kansas moves on. This one is you know, everybody should pick Florida. I mean, right here, Dakota's got Florida moving on, but upset pick right here. How are they going to play? Are they going to be able to roll roll Florida like Georgetown got rolled? Because I think Georgetown was a better team than Florida, in my personal opinion. And if they're able to do the things to Florida that they did to Georgetown, we'll be seeing Florida Gulf Coast in a grade 8. So, but I would say Florida's the better pick. Florida versus Kansas, grade 8. I think you see here we've got Kansas by Dillon's picked him. Michigan by Dakota. I'm already out of it, but if I was going to pick it, I think Kansas is the better of the two teams. So.
Yeah, I mean, not much difference for mine. I mean, I've still got Kansas winning, and I've still got Kansas winning even if it's over Michigan. That's the only difference in that bracket for me, and I've got Florida, even though I had Georgetown. I've got Florida moving on, even though I think that game will be closer because you can't tell what Florida's going to do. Let's go ahead and move over here to the East. Now, we did pretty good in the East. I've got all 4 of these games right, so
yeah.
Go ahead and break down your East.
Well, I just think that, Indiana's my top team. I think they're national champions. Syracuse, I picked UNLV here and was picking an upset. But Syracuse versus Indiana, I'm still going to Indiana. Marquette, who was a shocker to come out of here. You know, we had Bucknell or Butler we really thought was going to be in this thing. Even Dakota picks Davidson was real close to moving on. But Marquette here is a shocker. But I think Miami handles them. I think Miami is a top team in the nation. And you get that real, I think this is the best grade 8 game of all the regions. Indiana versus Miami. I think any one of those teams, whoever wins here, could win a national championship. So, and I think that Indiana, with the big man, Zeller, is going to move on.
Yeah, everything's the same here for me, so I really don't have anything different. I've still got Indiana winning the national championship, so that really doesn't change anything for my East bracket. Move over here. Let's go on over here to the West now. Got Gonzaga. They got upset, as we all know, by Wichita State, and you picked Wichita State to beat Pitt, which neither me or Dakota were able to do.
Yeah, I got lucky. You know, that was one of my upset picks, 8-9. I always try to mix them up a little bit right there, so I got lucky with that one. But that was, Wichita State's playing some good basketball, and beating Gonzaga showed that they're a upper level team. So, and of course, Ole Miss gets upset right here as LaSalle is a real, if it wasn't for Gulf Coast, Florida Gulf Coast, LaSalle would be the team we'd be talking about. That was the big Cinderella team. So, and they move on, and I think Wichita State, LaSalle. Who you pick, Dillon? I don't know.
It's a battle of upsets, but if I could go back, we really got to go back and look and pick here because nobody could have picked this game.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a bracket on any of these that somebody could go out on a limb and pick the top seeds to win these, the lower seeds to win these games. Look, you got Wisconsin here, and you probably have Wisconsin in your traditional bracket beating Ole Miss. You've got probably Kansas State going on and beating LaSalle. So, that game is not happening. Gonzaga or Pitt was going to beat Wichita State. You thought that, but here's the game. And I think, after what I've seen, Wichita State with the 3-ball, very dynamic, and you've got the great guard play here at LaSalle. I've got Wichita State moving on. Even though I didn't have it happen, I think Wichita State's going to win that game.
And what did you think of that Miami upset, Mississippi upset?
I'm getting little questions from my cameraman. The Mississippi upset was, I've already talked about it earlier in the show. I think they got cheated. But we won't start into that. Let's go ahead and start down here at the bottom, Coach.
Yeah, and I think Wichita State moves on as well. But Arizona played well, playing good basketball right now. And Ohio State, which is our favorite, as you see here, all of us picked Ohio State, so it's no shocker here. I think Ohio State beats Arizona. They move on. They're just a little bit more dynamic team, and they're upper echelon team, good defensive team, which is why I picked them. But I think Ohio State's got the easiest bracket here. I think they beat Arizona, they face Wichita State, maybe get a little scared, but they move on into the Final Four.
I'm gonna go ahead and brag here. I had Arizona in that game.
You did, yeah.
Out of all those, so I was right. So that's all right, though. I mean, we're not all perfect. We had all these upsets that made everybody mad. Up here, we've got Louisville against Oregon. That game, we didn't have Oregon getting past anybody there.
No, we had the Billikens, and look at that Billiken right there. Get a nice close up of that.
You might as well take him off. He's not.
Yeah, so we'll just scratch him off right here. We'll just move the old Billiken off, pop him off.
I do agree. I don't know what a Billiken is.
But we got Louisville versus Oregon. Louisville's a top team. I think Oregon, we'll give them a run. I think they'll give them a run. I really think that's going to be the first time they've been tested in a while. And so, but I think Louisville will move on. I like Tom Izzo. I hate Duke. So I think Michigan State will move on. And you get that Louisville-Michigan State game that everybody's looking forward to. And I think that I picked Michigan State. My Dillon and Dakota picked Louisville. And it's, it's going to be interesting. This is going to be the second best game of that grade 8 about which one moves on that Final Four. And I know that I'm going to pick Michigan State, but you're going with the Cardinals.
I know this. I've got this as probably the most intriguing game of the Sweet 16 because you think about these two teams, they've really sort of flew off the radar here in the tournament. Nobody's really talking about Duke in their national championship, but I've got Michigan State beating them because I think Tom Izzo's a great coach, and I just think that's his year. He's got these guys on track. Rick Pitino, they've done a great job to this point, and I said I was on his bandwagon in the first show, and I've got him moving on still, even though against Oregon, I do think Oregon plays a big factor. They're on a roll right now. They're really playing good. But I've still got Louisville playing in my national championship game against Indiana, but they're going to lose in that one if you watch the first show. So with that, we've still got another couple weeks going here. We're going to be back next Wednesday, so make sure you tune back in. We'll be back on here. We'll talk about the Final Four and our national championship game. Maybe things went as we planned. Maybe Dakota Jones will be back. He had to miss this show, but till then, we'd like to thank Freddie Regal for coming in and taping for us. Jacob Sheets taped for us too as well early. So we'd like to thank them for helping us out. And thank you for tuning in. Make sure you email us, phtvsports1@gmail.com. Or you can also tweet us at PHTV1. That's in all lowercase at PHTV1. Thank you. Remember, next Wednesday is when we'll be back on again. Thanks.
And this was the Patrick Henry Sports Bracketology Show.